Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and silence your mobile devices. Our program will begin shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and silence your mobile devices. Our program will begin shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and silence your mobile devices. Our program will begin shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats and silence your mobile devices. Our program will begin shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Sarah Macon Asiani, Deputy Assistant to the President and Deputy National Security Advisor to the Vice President.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. I will tell you right up front, my boss is a great public speaker. I don't have that skill, so please give me some grace. The woman we are about to hear from is witness to the unrelenting tenacity and resilience of the human spirit. Her story is compelling, relevant, and tragic, but victorious. Nadia Murad has endured suffering in her young life that most of us cannot fathom. Yet she rises every day with a mission. This mission drives her to overcome the devastating loss and violence she experienced at the hands of the Islamic State, and to push boldly forward to protect and rescue others from sexual violence and religious persecution. Many of you know Nadia. She is a survivor of genocide and human trafficking, a UN Goodwill Ambassador, an author, a Nobel Peace Prize recipient, an awe-inspiring international advocate for justice. Her testimony before the UN is widely credited for drawing the world's attention to the plight of her ethnic and religious community of Iraqi Yazidis, and she is also my dear friend. Nadia grew up in the small Yazidi village of Kocho, Iraq, with her siblings and her beloved mother, Shami. In 2014, the Islamic State invaded Kocho, slaughtering hundreds of Yazidi men, including several of her family members. Only later would Nadia come to know of the thousands of Yazidis killed, their bodies left in mass graves throughout Iraq, a community targeted for their beliefs, becoming victim to ISIS's brutal genocide campaign. Nadia and hundreds of other young women and children were taken away to serve as sabiya, sex slaves to ISIS fighters. But after months of unspeakable abuse and rape, Nadia heroically escaped her captors. In the 5 years since her escape, Nadia has fought to rebuild what was once the community she knew and loved, a community that was rich with heritage, and is now in a crisis. And she does that, she fights alongside her namesake organization, Nadia's Initiative. She advocates around the world for victims of sexual violence and religious persecution. She meets with global leaders, telling them of the Islamic State's genocidal ambitions, persuading governments and NGOs alike to work with her to rebuild the Yazidi homeland of Sinjar that ISIS destroyed. And she won't tell you this herself, but in 2018, when she won that Nobel Peace Prize, she donated all of her prize money to help her community rebuild. Because that's the kind of person that Nadia is. She is a diligent and generous fighter. She has always been a fighter. In the days leading up to ISIS's attack on her village, she wrapped a scarf around her head, grabbed a wooden stick, and practiced how she would fight to defend her people when that time came. And it was this same fighter who managed to escape the grasp of her captives. This same remarkable woman who battles every day on behalf of overlooked victims of religious persecution and sexual exploitation everywhere. The atrocities that ISIS perpetrated around the world and to Nadia's people are unfathomable. When they demanded her to convert, Nadia refused to denounce her religion. Members of Nadia's family remain in captivity today, and there are countless Yazidi women who remain victims in the sex trade. In her several appearances before the UN and reiterated at every meeting with global leaders, Nadia emphasizes not only what extremists robbed her of because of her religion, but that justice must be restored for the people still suffering under terrorism's hold. Nadia is a constant reminder of what is at stake when our first freedom is left unprotected. Nadia's challenge to everyone, particularly leaders throughout the world, is to make the Never Again slogan more than just an empty promise. And she lives with this mission driving her every move as she strives to be the last girl in the world with a story like hers. Nadia is unwavering in her kindness, her strength, and her bravery. The efforts of ISIS to erase her family, her people, and her religion, and their attempt to extinguish her spirit could not destroy her. Her quiet and gracious brand of courage is revolutionary in its gentleness, even as it is unshakable in its resolve. Her persistent resilience in speaking up and speaking out on behalf of her people and all of those oppressed continues to force the world not to look away, but to remember and to react. And it is an honor to be here today to introduce this extraordinary woman. May we be moved to follow her lead in working tirelessly to defeat the evils that tried to extinguish her light from this world. Please join me in welcoming my friend, Nadia Murad.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. I want to thank Vice President Pence, Secretary Pompeo, Ambassador Brownback, and the United States Office of International Religious Freedom for organizing this important conference. Thank you for your efforts to promote religious freedom. I'm grateful for having the chance to speak here today. In the summer of 2014, ISIS invaded my ancestral homeland of Shingal and began a systematic campaign of ethnic cleansing against the Yezidi community. The genocidal campaign included mass killings, forced conversions, and widespread sexual violence against women of all ages. These attacks resulted in the massacre of thousands of Yezidi members, the enslavement of more than 6,000 Yezidis, and displacement of over 400,000 Yezidis to IDP camps. All of this happened to my people because of our religion. Women in particular were used by ISIS as weapons of war against Yezidis and other religious minorities in Iraq. I lost 9 family members during this genocide. 21 women and girls from my family were taken into captivity, including myself. Today, I have 19 nieces and nephews that will grow up without a father. ISIS killed their father because they were Yezidis. This is only one story of one Yezidi family. Although ISIS has been largely defeated, my community and other religious minorities continue to feel lasting effects of genocide. History and research have taught us time and time again that genocide is an ongoing process. Nearly 350,000 Yezidis are still stranded in IDP camps in Kurdistan. Over 3,000 Yezidi women and children remain missing. In 2014, the international community rallied behind the Yezidi cause. Today, the Yezidi have largely been abandoned. While there is some support and empathy, there are no real efforts focused on the most important objective that would end the genocide and allow the Yezidis to heal. Enabling my community to return to our ancestral homeland of Shingal and rebuild our lives in a safe, healthy environment. The Yezidi community wants to return home. They want to start over, to rebuild their homes and farms, and to create new lives with their families. They want justice for the trauma they have suffered. However, they cannot achieve this without the support and partnership of international community. I am not here to paint a dark picture, but I am here to present the reality on the ground. I am here to tell you that the work is not done yet. Before it's too late, we must act. We must act to make it possible for all communities to return to Shingal, including Muslims and Christians and others. There are concrete steps we can take to support the repression of the Yezidi community, an essential step towards the end of this genocide. First, issues of local governance in Shingal must be resolved. While 80,000 Yezidis have returned to Shingal, local conflicts make it difficult to survive and rebuild. Dispute between Baghdad and Erbil over Shingal must end. Without a solution between them, Yezidis will continue to be the victims of their conflict. Second, we must promote long-term regional stability by investing in reconstruction and sustainable development initiatives. Funds are desperately needed to rebuild homes, hospitals, schools, and roads. Without international funding targeted to development in Shingal, stability cannot be achieved. Third, the international community should call upon Baghdad and Erbil to better integrate religious minorities into the security forces. These efforts will enable religious minorities to have a hand in their own security and also prevent future genocide. Fourth, the Yezidi community deserves justice for the atrocities they have faced, namely the prosecution of ISIS soldiers for committing genocide against Yezidis and other minorities. The evidence collected by the UNITAD team should be used in an international court. Finally, if we abandon the Yezidi community, we are helping ISIS accomplish its goal of eradicating Yezidis from their homeland. It is imperative that we urge the world to protect religious minorities globally. Next month will mark the 5th anniversary of the Yezidi genocide. If the international community does not act softly, my community will disappear from their homeland. Thank you for listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Honorable Mark Green, Ambassador of the United States Agency for International Development.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is indeed an honor to be with you to make history. Today we have the second ever Ministerial to advance religious freedom, and we have the largest ever human rights related gathering at the U.S. Department of State. So congratulations are in order. First to Secretary Pompeo and Ambassador Brownback for everything that they've done to pull these sessions together. To President Trump and Vice President Pence for welcoming faith communities, listening to faith communities, and defending faith communities like no other White House before. But congratulations, most importantly, to all of you. It has been said that the greatest measure of one's devotion to religious liberty is the willingness to defend it for those of other faiths. This week we have representatives from more than 130 countries and a wide range of faith traditions, each of us here to stand up for all of us here. For Americans who are joining us, this ministerial only seems natural. Advancing religious liberty is in our very national DNA. It is what brought the first pilgrims to our shores. Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence and, yes, our first Secretary of State, he believed so strongly in religious liberty that he himself authored Virginia's Statute for Religious Freedom. When it became law, he asked that it be translated into other languages and distributed as widely as possible. It was also one of only 3 accomplishments of his many accomplishments that he asked to be listed on his epitaph. Jefferson's notions would go on to be reflected in the very first line of our Constitution's Bill of Rights. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So the first line, it was the first line because Jefferson and others saw religious liberty as giving meaning to all of our other freedoms. President Reagan understood that. He knew that very well. And so when he was asked to give his vision for America, he referred to America as a shining city on a hill, purposefully echoing the words of John Winthrop and those early pilgrims who braved storms and waves to pursue the freedom to practice their faith. For those who have traveled here from beyond our shores, you know that we're hosting this ministerial because religious freedom, what we call our first freedom, is not merely an American value. It's a universal one, and it is a human right. You realize that we need this historic ministerial because in today's world, too many people in too many places suffer violence and persecution merely for exercising that human right. The old scourge of anti-Semitism has once again reared its ugly head in Europe. Violence against Jews and their places of worship is on the rise. The German government's anti-Semitism commissioner actually warned Jewish men against wearing the kippah in public, fearing that it was no longer safe for them to do so. And of course, we in the U.S. are hardly immune. Last October, 11 worshipers were killed and 7 others injured in a shooting at a Pittsburgh synagogue. And Jews aren't the only targets of this kind of hatred and violence. Several years ago in my home state of Wisconsin, 6 people were gunned down in a Sikh temple. We've seen horrific shootings at New Zealand mosques, and 51 people there lost their lives and scores more were injured. And tragic church bombings in Sri Lanka on Easter Sunday. 259 people killed on Christianity's holiest day. People of faith struck down for their faith. What's even worse is that religious intolerance and persecution has effectively become official policy in some places in this world. In Burma, government security forces attempted to ethnically cleanse the country of its Rohingya population, prompting more than 750,000 to flee to Bangladesh. Most of those left behind have been forced to live in what can only be described as prison camps, and the government has stood by as groups have poisoned citizens against their Rohingya neighbors. Since Russia illegally took control of Crimea, the Tatar community has faced ever greater repression and harassment. it's increasingly dangerous for them to practice their culture, speak their language, or observe their Muslim faith. Tatar activists have been arrested, Tatar media outlets have been shuttered, and Tatar businesses raided. One observer described it as the slow-motion cultural and ethnic elimination of the Crimean Tatars. In China, 11 million Uyghur Muslims have been treated brutally. Many forced into government-sponsored re-education camps. This kind of inhumanity reminds us of the darkest days of Chairman Mao's Cultural Revolution. Beijing seems determined to strip Uyghurs of their individuality, their identity, and yes, their faith. In northern Iraq, ISIS has committed genocide against Christians and Yezidis and other minorities. Places of worship have been desecrated, women enslaved and raped, and men tortured and beheaded. ISIS sought to wipe these Christians and Yezidis and others from the face of the earth, even though they've been a vibrant part of the region's cultural mosaic for countless centuries. President Lincoln once said that he felt sorry for the man who can't feel the whip when it is laid on another man's back. Thanks to our President and Vice President, USAID and others are working to offer some relief and assistance to those who have suffered so very much. Our Genocide Recovery and Persecution Response Program is already providing $340 million for work in northern Iraq. We're working with 57 new local partners, 13 faith-based groups, and 35 international organizations, providing urgent relief and humanitarian assistance to devastated communities. We're collaborating with heroic organizations like the Chaldean Catholic Archdiocese of Erbil, the Humanitarian Nineveh Relief Organization, Yazda, the Assyrian Aid Society, Catholic Relief Services, Caritas Iraq, and more. Our projects are community-driven and community-led. For example, we're partnering with the Chaldean Culture Society to restore and stabilize power services in the village of Al-Qash. We're working to rehabilitate olive groves in Zaytuni, where olives are the main source of income for those who have returned. In Sinjar and Sununi, we've helped 34 small business owners to resume or expand their operations. And in coming months, we'll be working with an additional 123 small businesses to do the same. We're also partnering with international teams that are already on the ground in these communities. Today I can announce that we've recently provided Samaritan's Purse, a longtime partner of USAID, with an additional $3 million of funding to provide shelter and clean water to ISIS-targeted communities. Over the last year, we've signed memoranda of understanding with the governments of Hungary and Poland, as well as the Knights of Columbus and Malteser International, all to ensure that we coordinate as communities and optimize our efforts. Just yesterday, we signed a new MOU with the community of San Egidio. At this week's Ministerial, we come together as one. Voices from more than 130 nations and a wide range of faith traditions, Muslim and Jew, Christian and Hindu, Buddhist and Baha'i, and more. We're speaking up for the rights of worshipers, not merely here at home, but in far-off lands. Not merely for those of our own faith, but for those of others as well. We are here to reaffirm, as Vice President Pence has put it, an attack on one faith is an attack on us all. But each of us knows in our heart that there is more we must do to show a doubting world what religious liberty can and should mean. In Christianity's Gospel according to Luke, the crowds call out to John the Baptist asking, "What then shall we do?" He answers by saying that whoever has 2 tunics should share with him who has none. Whoever has food should do the same. Ancient Jewish sages wrote in the Talmudic texts that the world depends upon 3 things: Torah, the law, service to God and others, and acts of loving kindness. Included in the sayings of the prophet Muhammad is the following: "That man is not from me who sleeps contentedly while his neighbor sleeps hungry." Mahatma Gandhi told us the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service to others. The Dalai Lama has written, "It is under the greatest adversity that there exists the greatest potential for doing good, both for oneself and others." The Reverend Billy Graham liked to say, "God has given us 2 hands, one to receive with and one to give with." And St. John Paul II reminded us, every generation of Americans needs to know that freedom consists not in doing what we like, but in having the right to do what we ought. I sense a common theme there. This past March in Makgoba, Jordan, I visited a center run by Caritas International, a center that provides training to refugees in the timeless art of crafting mosaics. The refugees were Christians who had fled their homes in Karakosh, Mosul, and Baghdad to escape the brutality of ISIS. Makgoba has been famous since Roman days, not only for its beautiful mosaics, but also as a model of religious tolerance. It's a place where Christians and Muslims have lived peacefully, side by side. Caritas is helping Iraqi refugees, people who have had so much taken from them, to develop skills and craftsmanship that enable them to play a role in furthering the city's beautiful ancient tradition. Makgoba, a tolerant and diverse city, has given these refugees the opportunity to once again practice their faith freely. It has enabled them to become a part of the area's rich fabric of history and culture, and taught them a skill that can help them to begin to economically rebuild their lives. Before I left Makgoba on that trip, the refugees presented me with a beautiful mosaic to express their gratitude for what we've done to support their communities in their time of need. We will display this in USAID's main lobby as a symbol of why it is so important to preserve the freedom of worship and to assist those who face persecution and violence for exercising their faith. This week, we affirm our support for the freedoms that enable us to meet openly and to speak openly about the importance of faith in our communities and in our countries. But we go a step further. We invite each other. No, we challenge each other to take up the mission that the world's great faith traditions call for. To lift lives and build communities for believers and non-believers alike. To share a tunic with him who has none. USAID will proudly join all of you in that effort. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Honorable Deborah Birx, Ambassador at Large for U.S. Special Representative for Global Health Diplomacy.
Good afternoon. What an unbelievable, vibrant opening to our afternoon session. It's such a privilege to be here and recognize the strong support of Secretary Pompeo and Ambassador Brombeck. We're going to talk about the intersection of religious freedom with resilient, free, and sustainable community. And running through all of that is health of those communities. 16 years ago, PEPFAR was born. That's the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, the largest single response to a disease ever harnessed in the world. Combating HIV/AIDS around the globe, announced by President Bush, supported by President Obama, and proudly supported by President Trump. Throughout these 16 years, this program recognized the important part of the religious communities and the communities of faith. When President Bush announced PEPFAR in 2003, there was an intentional and deep investment in faith-based organization, understanding when there was no one and there was nothing. There was the communities of faith who stood beside their dying communities, where 20% to 30% of the adults were dying of HIV/AIDS, and most of the children were orphaned and in child-led heads of household. It was in that moment, though, that the community's faith stood beside the dying and provided them that compassion and light in that depth of darkness. 16 years ago and moving forward, we've now come to the time through 9 Congresses and 3 times we've been reauthorized by bipartisan support, recognizing that that is what brings us together, Republicans and Democrats, but Americans, together where we can address the most difficult issues, where many people thought HIV/AIDS could never be addressed. We're talking about communities now where the virus is no longer winning and is under control. But amid that amazing success that was announced World AIDS Day last year by Vice President Pence, he recognized again the role of communities of faith, recognizing Sister Mary from Kenya, who again stood up 20 years ago with Father D'Agostino to respond to that need of that community and has raised more than 10,000 children into adulthood through the support of PEPFAR and others, and as mentioned, through USAID. She has recognized that the needs are greater than health and has brought those programs together. But when we looked at all of our successes, we still saw we were missing. We were missing men between 25 and 45 who believed themselves to always be well. We were missing adolescent girls and young women who hadn't accessed any health and were HIV positive. And it was in that moment that Vice President Pence announced another $100 million invested in communities of faith to raise awareness that HIV/AIDS can be conquered when you are united together in a response of compassion and passion from the American people. That's what brings us great hope. This week, recognizing 50 years from landing on the moon, I will remind people that I was using a slide rule when we went to the moon. We didn't wait for the supercomputers. We harnessed what we had and we made it into something spectacular. That's what you do every day, and that's what our panelists are doing. So I will be pleased to announce our panelists. I'm going to sit down and ask all of the panelists to make their way to the stage while I introduce them. Panelists, please come forward. First, our first panelist is the Secretary of State for Aid for Persecuted Christians from Hungary, Tristan Azbej. Thank you, welcome. Happy to have you today. Our next panelist from Poland, the Cabinet Minister of Humanitarian Aid, Makgoba. Thank you. Next from Germany, Commissioner Markus Grubel. Thank you. Focused on religious freedom around the world And it's my deep pleasure to introduce Archbishop of Cape Town, from the long legacy of Cape Town leadership in HIV/AIDS, Archbishop Makgoba. Thank you so much for being here. So I'm going to let each of the panelists give you a few minutes of an opening statement, and then I have some questions for them. So starting right now with the State Secretary from Hungary. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon. My title is State Secretary for the Aid of Persecuted Christians. I believe I'm the only government official in the world with this title, and thank you very much. The Hungarian government has decided to set up a specific aid program for persecuted Christians in 2016 for two reasons. One is because of our identity. We are a Christian nation. We are proud to say that. There are not many European countries where politicians are allowed to say such a thing. It doesn't have to do necessarily with religion. It's not for politicians to interfere with the relationship of man with God. I'm referring to cultural values based on which our society, our culture was based on. So this is one of the reasons. The other one was that we have came to know it was difficult because it was quite a hidden fact that currently in the world, Christianity is the most persecuted religion. According to our own research, but by the British report that has been just released 2 weeks ago by the Bishop of Truro, 80% of the people who are persecuted for their faith in the world are Christians. So this is why we have set up a program to aid them. But I have to clarify it here that we are not only providing direct assistance to Christians. That wouldn't be too Christian-like, wouldn't it? So our support for Christians is explicit but non-exclusive. We already included the Yezidi community to our program, and then we just sent a delegation to see the case of the Rohingya Muslims, refugees in Bangladesh. So we are expanding, but we are keeping the focus on Christians. And from the beginning, we were also, even though we are government, we were also acting like some sort of advocacy group or raising awareness for the Christian issue, because we have seen that there is a neglect, there is a wall of silence built around this problem. So in the international organizations, we were trying to raise awareness, and also in the same time we have started an aid program, a humanitarian and reconstruction program, which has a very unique character of providing aid directly to the communities, which I believe we will be speaking more later.
Great, thank you. Turning to Poland, our cabinet minister.
Good afternoon, everyone, ambassadors. Thank you for inviting me to this really important meeting, because it is a great occasion to show, to make sure our Polish point of view on humanitarian aid, because it's specific point of view. It's our most point is that we should do providing aid on the spot. It is not really often in the European Union. It's some kind of special area. And actually, I am the cabinet minister. I took my office 2 months ago, but I continue great works of Beata Kempa. She is now a member of European Parliament, and our Polish policy. So let me show this policy. So we have this idea of providing aid on the spot. So we believe that by doing so, we are able to respect the culture, the religion, and the background of any individual who needs to help, and don't want to take them away from their own land, identity, and roots. And it is really important for us. So we help all people in need, whatever their faith and confession. Still, particular attention is paid to persecuted religious minority group rejected in their society. Yeah, we know about Daesh atrocities in the Middle East and about cases of violent attacks in a number of places around the world. And we know that isn't, and it won't to be easy for victims of violence to regain trust, understanding, and respect for diversity of origin and religion. And I would show some Polish projects, some example of Polish emergency assistance, mainly in the Middle East. So we heard really moving testimony of the a few minutes ago. So we have some projects in Iraq. There is one of them is the Center of Child Oncology Gene in the Dohuk province in Iraqi Kurdistan. Thanks to government funding, the center can provide care to children of all faiths and to refugees, IDPs, and local community members. An example of Polish efforts of minority is one of NGOs named Eagle Watch, mainly active in Iraq. The organization is carrying out a project financed by the Polish government and handle mainly aid to Yazidis and Christians, because we know that these groups were most affected by ISIS violence. Second project about I would to say is the project in Sinjar Valley in Knake, the town Knake. In this project involves building farm animals, enclosures, and buying pools of livestock. We support women saved from Daesh, so-called ISIS survivors, helping them to become self-sufficient. The feedback about this project is really clear. The project is highly appreciated by the families there. It makes them self-sufficient, improves their financial standing, and lifts their mood. Plus, in last year, we helped 80 Yazidis families. This year, we plan to reach the region of Bashika and extra 180 families. We would like to expand our activities in order to provide assistance first of all to Christian family, of course, but also and to Muslim families, victims of Daesh violence as well, really as well. The same can be said about projects intended to create new jobs in a small trade or local craft. For example, small shops, bee breeders, hairdressers, bakers, tailors, doctors, officers. They are implemented in a city like Caracas, where the largest Christian community lived before the war in Iraq. They are all about giving people opportunities to resume their professional life. They also have a long-term effect, and it is important for us, to make local communities resilient and independent from external assistance. Projects, of course, are open to members of any religious group living there, with special focus on Yazidis and Christians. This is the challenge for all of us, the field of education, international policy, and humanitarian action alike. In Nineveh province, including in Bashiba, is, as we can heard, is an ethnic mosaic, place of living the Yazidis, Sunni Arabs, Christians, Turkmens, and Kurds. We try to bring help and work towards unity and solidarity based on the respect of diversity of religion and views. And this was perfectly described by one Polish priest, Andrzej Halemba, who on behalf of one of the NGOs carries out project in reconstruction the Nineveh Valley in Iraq. And let me quote his words. Along the material construction of homes and churches, there is a fundamental issue which must be repaired in this land, coexistence. So this word coexistence. In the order for this happen, Christians and Muslims must work together to make Iraq a united nation. So this is really a challenge for all of us in the field of education, international politics. Religion freedom cannot be overlooked or ignored. We need to be sensitive in humanitarian aid and in development assistance. our interest needs to be living and authentic. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think you've heard from our first two leaders talking about local, immediate, at the site of need responses. And I think you also heard that from Administrator Green of really approaching local organizations, trusted local organizations that can really immediately have a direct impact when the need is right there and relevant. Now we're going to turn to Germany and the Commissioner.
Ladies and gentlemen, I will be speaking in German. She will translate. I think it's better for you. Perhaps better for me. Seit letztem Jahr bin ich der erste Beauftragte der deutschen Bundesregierung für weltweite Religionsfreiheit.
Last year, I became the first ever German Commissioner for Global Freedom of Religion.
Mit der Schaffung dieses neuen Amtes hat die deutsche Bundesregierung bewusst ein Zeichen gesetzt. Wir nehmen die Lage der weltweiten Religionsfreiheit genau in den Blick und setzen uns für eine stärkere Einhaltung dieses zentralen Menschenrechts ein.
By creating this post, the German federal government sent a very clear message. We are taking a very close look at the situation of global freedom of religion worldwide. And we're working to ensure that this core human right is being adhered to more and more strongly.
Obwohl wir jetzt für das Menschenrecht Religionsfreiheit einen eigenen Beauftragten haben, ist uns wichtig, dass alle Menschenrechte gleichwertig sind. Es gibt kein Menschenrecht erster und zweiter Klasse, ja kein Menschenrechte-Ranking.
Although we now have this post of a commissioner for the human right of religious freedom, all human rights have the same value for us. We don't differentiate. There is no human right of a first or a second class. We do not see any human rights ranking.
Religiöse Akteure, religiöse Autoritäten können eine wichtige Rolle bei der Stärkung der Religionsfreiheit spielen.
Religious actors and authorities can play a key role in strengthening religious freedom.
In der Vergangenheit wurden religiöse Akteure entweder als Opfer oder als Täter von Verletzungen der Religionsfreiheit oder der Menschenrechte betrachtet. Dieses Bild verändert und differenziert sich. Religiöse Gruppen können sowohl positiven als negativen Einfluss auf Religionsfreiheit haben.
In the past, religious actors were seen either as victims or as perpetrators of violations of religious freedom or of human rights. This notion is now changing and is becoming more differentiated. Religious groups can have both a positive and a negative influence on religious freedom.
Dort, wo positives Potenzial in der Zusammenarbeit besteht, sollte es genutzt werden. Und dort, wo religiöse Akteure Teil des Problems sind, sollten sie auch Teil der Lösung werden.
Wherever there is a positive potential in cooperation, it should be harnessed. And wherever religious actors are part of the problem, they should also be part of the solution.
Wenn man in die Welt blickt, dann sieht man, wie stark Religionen das Leben von Individuen und Gesellschaften prägen. Sie erreichen mit ihrer Botschaft viele Menschen und dringen in einigen Ländern zu Teilen der Gesellschaft vor, die wir sonst nur schwer erreichen können.
If we look at the situation in the world, then we can see how much religions and faith mark the life of people, of individuals and of whole societies. They, with their messages, can reach many people, and in some countries, they can reach parts of societies which are otherwise very difficult for us to reach out to.
Das deutsche Entwicklungsministerium hat eine Strategie entwickelt, Religionen als Partner in der Entwicklungszusammenarbeit. Die Strategie geht vor allem auf das Potenzial der Zusammenarbeit mit religiösen Akteuren ein.
The German Development Ministry has developed a strategy on religions as partners in development cooperation. And this strategy focuses on the potential of cooperation with religious actors.
Ich möchte ein Beispiel nennen, die Zentralafrikanische Republik, gewaltfreier Dialog für Versöhnung und Wiederaufbau.
Let me mention one example from the Central African Republic. This is about nonviolent dialogue for reconciliation and reconstruction.
Seit des Beginns des Bürgerkriegs im Jahr 2013 sind tausende Menschen ums Leben gekommen. Derzeit befindet sich 500.000 Menschen auf der Flucht.
Since the beginning of the civil war in 2013, thousands of people have lost their lives. And right now, 500,000 of people have been displaced.
Als ein zentraler Akteur zur Verhinderung weiterer Gewalt wird die interreligiöse Plattform in der Zentralafrikanischen Republik angesehen.
A key actor to prevent any further violence is the PCRC, the Platform of Religious Confessions.
Die 3 religiösen Führer der großen Konfessionen in der Zentralafrikanischen Republik setzen sich für Frieden in ihrem Land ein. Durch ihre Initiative und Bereitschaft zum Dialog miteinander ermöglichen sie den Gläubigen einen gewaltfreien Diskurs, der die Aussöhnung und den Frieden zwischen den verschiedenen Glaubensgemeinschaften stärkt.
The 3 religious leaders of the major confessions in the Central African Republic are working hard to promote peace in their country. It is thanks to their initiative and their readiness to engage in dialogue that they enable believers to engage in nonviolent discourse and strengthen the reconciliation and peace building between the various faith communities.
Solche Formen des religiösen Dialogs und der Kooperation werden durch das deutsche Entwicklungsministerium unterstützt.
The German Development Ministry supports this kind of religious dialogue and cooperation.
Im Deutschen Auswärtigen Amt gibt es außerdem das Referat Religion und Außenpolitik. Es geht hier um die Friedensverantwortung der Religionen. Jede Religion hat im Kern eine Friedensbotschaft. Daran erinnern wir und bauen darauf auf.
And in the Federal Foreign Office in Germany, we have a division dedicated to religion and foreign policy. And this is about the responsibility for peace of the various religions. Every religion has at its core a peace message, and that is what we want to draw the attention to, and that is what we build upon.
Auch hier setzen wir als deutsche Regierung auf einen stärkeren Dialog mit Religionsvertretern.
And this is an area where we as the German government work towards stronger dialogue with representatives of faith communities.
Ziel dieser neuen Initiative ist es, das gesellschaftliche Friedenspotenzial der verschiedenen Religionen zu diskutieren und stärker mit der deutschen Außenpolitik zu verzahnen.
The aim of this new initiative is to discuss, debate the potential for peace, social potential for peace of the various religions, and to align that more closely with Germany's foreign policy.
Es sollen Religionsgemeinschaften und auch glaubensbasierte Institutionen, die gemeinsame Interessen wie Frieden und Stabilität vertreten, als strategische Partner für ein tragfähiges Netzwerk gewonnen werden.
We want to work together with religious communities and faith-based institutions that represent joint interests such as peace and stability, and we want to engage with them as strategic partners in one strong network.
Ich schließe mit einem Aspekt, der mir mit Blick auf die heutige Konferenz wichtig ist.
And let me close by focusing on one aspect which I believe is very important also with regard to this conference here today.
Um die Religions- und Weltanschauungsfreiheit weltweit zu stärken und um Verfolgte zu schützen, sind 3 Schritte unerlässlich.
In order to strengthen the freedom of religion and belief worldwide and to protect those that are persecuted, we believe that 3 steps are absolutely necessary.
Dieser Dreiklang lautet: Beobachten, Aufschreien und Bündnisse schließen, um zu handeln.
And this triad is the triad of monitoring, of sparking an outcry, and of forging alliances.
Beobachten ist wichtig, denn nur dadurch können Verstöße öffentlich gemacht werden und nur so dringen Verletzungen der Religionsfreiheit in das Bewusstsein der Menschen ein und ein Aufschreien kann erfolgen.
Monitoring is important because that is the only way to make violations known to the public, and only then they will reach the conscience of the public. The public will learn about the abuses of religious freedom, and this knowledge, this awareness is necessary to generate outrage, to spark an outcry.
Schließen müssen wir Bündnisse, denn nur dann ist unser Einsatz für weltweite Religionsfreiheit erfolgreich. Bündnisse ermöglichen eine größere Reichweite des Aufschreis. Bündnisse können helfen, gegenseitige Vorurteile abzubauen und Raum für Verständnis und Toleranz zu schaffen. Bündnisse genießen eine höhere Legitimität. Thank you very much.
And finally, we need to forge alliances, because only then can our commitment to global religious freedom be really successful. Alliances allow us to have a greater reach with generating an outcry, and alliances can help to reduce mutual prejudices and create space for understanding and tolerance. And alliances have a higher degree of legitimacy. Thank you.
Thank you. Archbishop.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Birx. Let me also acknowledge particularly those from the household of faith. And just to start with a disclaimer that I speak for a particular context and a particular faith, and within a huge country, South Africa. And let me also thank the organizers of these discussions for your dedication to improving respect for people's dignity and the material condition of their lives. We all agree that the global context is characterized by restlessness, uncertainty, and resentment at our current political, economic, and social order, especially among young people who intuitively discern that we have a shared global responsibility for one another, that we will survive on this planet only together, and it is young people, even children, who are playing an important part in stepping up to lead an international movement aimed at changing energy and economic policies to safeguard the future by protecting the environment for generations to come. The young people recognize that our common destiny depends on moving beyond traditional divides between people, among them party political divisions within nations, and forging real democratic participation and global solidarity. Professor Francis Fukuyama says, despite the economic development achieved, this liberal world order did not benefit everyone. Inequality increased dramatically, and many of the benefits of growth flowed primarily to an elite defined by primarily education. He says, and I quote him, "Human psychology is much more complex than the rather simple-minded economic model suggests, and that we need to step back and develop a deeper and richer understanding of human motivation and behavior." Ambassador Birx, with that comment, allow me to really reflect in South Africa and to look at the interfaith, interreligious complexion of our country. Apartheid was dreadful for a particular Christian religious group based on race. perpetrated atrocity against the majority of South Africans of different racial groupings and different religious affiliation. And thank God that the various religious communities came together and said, that is not right, and that cannot be done in the name of religion. Even pop stars joined to say, we need religious freedom and a democratic dispensation for all South Africans, regardless of their religious persuasion. And so I want to argue that because of that sad history, South Africa is now best placed as a unique case to study religious freedom and to look at interfaith cooperation and understanding how we could get by as different religions with the emphasis on human dignity, equality, and the right to equal opportunity of all citizens. I don't want to paint a rosy picture of South Africa. We still have our challenges, and we have what I call the new struggle, in which we need to continue to deal with inequality of opportunity and to deal with poverty. We are learning as South Africans that a constitutional democracy entails more than participating in the ritual of regular elections, but it needs quality participation by people at grassroots and the people who are marginalized within all communities of South Africa. On the question of AIDS and HIV, without bragging, I think the religious community and the civil society and the churches were the first one to highlight the scourge of HIV and AIDS. They opened their schools, their mosques, their churches for voluntary testing. I remember the first time when stigma was high in our country and the religious leaders were accused of perpetuating stigma. We had to go and do voluntary testing ourselves. And I went to some of my parishioners to go and do testing publicly. I must confess, it was the scariest thing ever to do as a religious leader. I don't know why was I scared, because I was counseled and I was taken through the rigmarole of pre-testing, but that helped me to appreciate the extent to which people were afraid of testing and knowing their status. We are grateful to PEPFAR and the Global Fund and USAID, which enable the churches then to do voluntary testing. And we know that things have changed. The multilateral agreements that international organizations enter with our countries are working, but to some extent, sometimes they sideline the faith community. And medical intervention is very important, but social intervention and support that the churches are offering is indispensable. And I hope that in our discussions and in formulating policies, we will look at, yes, working at country levels, but also never sidelining the faith communities and working with them directly in this interface that you spoke about of religious tolerance, religious freedom, and health. I emphasize something like what you have in the US, the welfare reforms of 1996, the so-called charitable choice legislation that ensures that state resources could be accessed by faith group in spite of the separation of church and state. And I need to possibly end there, but just to emphasize that medical treatment programs are essential in the fight against HIV and AIDS in our country and the world over, but they cannot address the burning social factors that need to be addressed in order to overcome the pandemic. Churches and faith communities with a long-established presence in local communities are well qualified to tackle issues such as why so many women interrupt their treatment regimes or do not stay on TB treatment. So religious freedom and active citizens are sustainable enterprises that can ensure that countries deal with intolerance. We have a shared responsibility across regions of the world, across political divisions, across cultural and religious diversity, and across economic and social difference to ensure a future for the coming generations. Let me end by sharing one example of how we achieve this in South Africa. We have started what we call courageous conversations with the mining communities. And in these courageous conversations, we get all the mining executives, we get the labor unions, we get the faith communities around where mining happens, and we get a representative of the community. And we courageously look at what impacts the community and how mining can be a source of the common good. And through that platform, we are able to get the Baha'i, the Muslims, the Jews, the Christians, and other faith communities to specifically look at an economic enterprise, but that deals with education, health, and fostering the common good in South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was precisely the gap that Vice President Pence saw on World AIDS Day, that we had continued our investment into faith-based organizations that were delivering services, but not directly into the communities of faith that had that trust element in the community that could raise awareness. And that's where that $100 million is going, both for justice for children to prevent gender-based violence of young children, which we know is a key contributor to HIV infection, but also really to help us find men in the community because of the position. And we did find out, we asked men who they believe the most in their lives, and it was their moms. And their moms are in the communities of faith. And so we're using that intersection of research and moms and communities of faith to really raise this awareness. So in light of time, I'm going to combine two questions and kind of put you on the spot just a little bit. So we won't necessarily go in order. You can just indicate that you're ready to speak. So we've seen over the last number of years an acceleration in displaced persons, 70 million displaced persons, 25 million refugees. And we heard from each of you as a bilateral host country governments, direct investment in communities of faith and religious organizations to deliver services. And the importance of understanding that religious freedom within those displaced camps and services are critically important. So I guess my question for you all is not only how you continue to promote the prevention and improvements to assist survivors that we have talked about, but how do you use your understanding, the examples that you gave us that you were doing as a government, how do you take that into the multilateral space to encourage multilateral investments into service organizations that are religious-based, that can promote community survival and assist survivors, as well as provide services.
Well,
yes, Archbishop.
Thank you. Well, I think if we look at the multilateral platforms like that of the environmental concerns that led to the COP agreement in Paris, we could convene ecumenical and interfaith liaison bodies where those ecumenical and interfaith liaison bodies work with their national governments to highlight some of the challenges that people have at country level. And an occasion like this could be an occasion to give feedback as to what policies work and what policies don't work, because the experience is some of the multilateral agreement that you enter with certain of our countries make sense at a technocratic level, but when they go where the rubber hits the road, they don't make sense. And so my suggestion is really parallel to this, or with this, convene ecumenical and interfaith liaison bodies to actually learn from one another.
So when you all gave examples of the direct, immediate, site-specific intervention for survivors and communities, do you take those examples then back into the European Union and back to the UN to really show what an impact you can have when you preserve religious freedom and directly invest in religious organizations that have an impact with the communities?
And if I may, ever since we have started the Hungary Helps program in 2016, something that was unique about our approach is that we directly donate to the church institutions, to the church organizations. We are not using the middleman agencies. We are not donating to the big international programs. And the reason for that is we don't want to support the big international programs. We want to support the communities in need. So I don't mean to generalize, and I'm full of respect to the international humanitarian agencies, but you have to face that when you donate and let them manage the funds. There is sometimes up to 40% that is taken away as administration costs. Whereas, for example, when we provide $1 million to the, let's say, the Chaldean Catholics of Iraq, then they will receive $1 million. So easy as that. And one thing is that they know the best what they need the donation for. A mistake that we are trying not to commit is trying to be smarter than those we are supposed. So we go there, personally, me, my colleagues, we visit the conflict regions, and we ask one simple question that how we may help you. And the answer most of the time is help us remain in our homeland, to live a safe, secure, and peaceful life. So this is what we provide donation for. So this is how we started to work, and it proved that it's, I wouldn't like to call it successful, because we are talking about large humanitarian disasters, but it's an efficient way of providing support. I don't know if Father Salar Kadjo from Telescope on the Nineveh Plains is here with the audience. I've seen him earlier, but he could give a testimony on how we work together in reconstructing a small town called Telskov. Telskov is on the Nineveh Plains, and it has been occupied by Daesh in 2014. And by the time it got freed in 2016, they had 900 buildings that were damaged. The church was completely ruined because Daesh used it as a target practice. And the Hungary Helps program, we donated, once again, directly to the Chaldean Christians in Iraq, even somewhat less than $2 million. And that $2 million, when it was given directly and it was used in an efficient way, was enough to reconstruct all the buildings. And 1,000 families out of the 1,300 families who had fled have returned. 3/4 of the families had returned. And we are talking about the Iraqi Christians who had dropped the population by 80% in the course of 1 decade. Yet, we managed to save with direct donation, with not even using a large amount of funds, a whole community. And this is the example. I'm always talking about it, and it may sound like some sort of PR stunt for the Hungarian government, but this is not why we are doing. We are looking for allies who would also experiment with this approach. And I'm happy to say that we have found our allies. Today I'm sitting among friends. We were very proud to sign a memorandum of understanding with USAID last December, and currently we are here with the Hungary Helps Agency's Director General in Washington this week to announce the first projects that we will do together with the United States in northern Iraq for the Christians and the Yezidi. And also with the Polish government, we are already supporting orphans in Syria through the Syriac Orthodox Church, and also with the government of Germany, we are also in advanced talks to support Middle Eastern persecuted communities. So this is the example we offer. We are ready to share not only our successes, but also our failures, but we encourage all the governments and the international organizations to perhaps shift their activities by using funds through the big international organizations and follow the approach of direct donations to church institutions, because they are the closest to the society, and in many cases they provide care and social services to these communities in need.
Well, that is a great example, because countries are built but one resilient and free community at a time. And that kind of example is really key. Another example on how you formed a coalition, and you think that coalition can be expanded to impact the larger, we heard about USAID investing directly in that same model. Do you have hope that that can be taken into the larger funders to really see that direct investment into communities, communities by community, build strong, free, religious, secure groups?
Okay. Let me answer in Polish to be more precise. So, mamy bardzo podobne spojrzenie jak Węgrzy na cały temat. Bardzo dla nas jest istotne to, że i często to mówią też same organizacje, potwierdzają, to znaczy pomoc na miejscu i środki wydane na pomoc na miejscu często są kilkukrotnie lepiej, precyzyjniej trafiają do osób, które potrzebują tego wsparcia, niż gdyby byłyby wydane w sposób właśnie przez szersze organizacje. Natomiast my też jesteśmy bardzo zadowoleni z memorandum, które podpisaliśmy w listopadzie z USAID. I to jest jedna z metod współpracy międzynarodowej, ale mamy wewnętrzne doświadczenia. Znaczy doświadczenia zewnętrzne są trudniejsze. Mamy wewnętrzne doświadczenia, które pokazują, że bardzo precyzyjnie konsultujemy z przedstawicielami i różnych religii. Wszystkie nasze dokumenty, które są kierowane na pomoc, wsparcie, czy humanitarne, czy rozwojowe, ale też organizujemy, właściwie co roku jest organizowana taka duża konferencja w Krakowie skierowana bardziej lokalnie wewnątrz Polski, ale na którą są zapraszani liderzy poszczególnych wyznań, zwłaszcza z Bliskiego Wschodu, którzy też mogą konsultować te nasze programy i dokumenty, założenia do dokumentów, które później realizujemy w praktyce. I rzeczywiście to, co mówi pan minister z Węgier, to dla nas jest niezwykle istotne, że ta pomoc bezpośrednio, współpraca chociażby z kościołami, to jest coś, co jest najbardziej skuteczne i sami chociażby biskupi z Syrii wskazują właśnie na efektywność takiej pomocy.
Well, I must admit we have a very similar perspective to our Hungarian friends. We believe
Beautiful language.
that the best way is to cooperate through NGOs, and that's what our NGOs say, that the best way is to work with people on the ground, and the money spent there in cooperation with the people in local communities, are just more efficient and fine-tuned to their needs. Definitely, we can put it up at the higher level to large organizations, but our preferred method is to stay on the ground. We are very much satisfied with the Memorandum of Understanding signed also with the USAID in November last year. This is just a method of international cooperation for us. Moreover, we believe that any assistance or help should be based on consultation, and that's our domestic experience, that any policy paper on assistance or development is produced in a large consultation, interfaith consultation, in a wide dialogue with all, also religious stakeholders. Moreover, every year in Krakow, we organize a pan-European interfaith conference with representatives of the Middle East religions and confessions invited. Together with experts, they can also talk, exchange experiences, and also discuss our policy papers, or at least their assumptions.
Jeszcze tylko dodam, że jeśli mogę. Także jesteśmy z wykorzystaniem narzędzi międzynarodowych. Uważamy, że tutaj jest bardzo duża rola wszystkich agent organizacji ONZ-u. I to Polska, i z tego też jesteśmy dumni, zainicjowała czy doprowadziła do uchwalenia 30 maja bieżącego roku rezolucji ustanawiającej Międzynarodowy Dzień Upamiętnienia Ofiar Aktów Przemocy ze względu na religię lub wyznanie. I ta symboliczna rezolucja pokazuje, że rzeczywiście współpraca międzynarodowa powinna się opierać na wartościach, niewątpliwie na wartościach, i od wartości, od wspólnych wartości, które wszyscy mamy, powinniśmy wychodzić dalej i rozszerzać tę współpracę.
And I do believe that what Minister from Hungary said, that it's good to have cooperation. We do have cooperation with Syrian churches, for instance. And just to add on international tools that we have at our disposals, definitely UN agencies are important actors in providing assistance. And let me just give one example of our activities. Upon Poland's initiative on the 13th of May, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution to establish the International Day to commemorate the victims of violence on the grounds of beliefs and religion. I do believe this is a symbolic resolution that shows that any act of assistance or help should be based on values, and only shared values can bring us to a higher level of cooperation.
Great. Superb translating. So we're going to be very brief to the commissioner, and then I'll wrap us up to get you to your coffee break.
Die deutsche Bundesregierung arbeitet eng mit religiösen Organisationen zusammen. Caritas International, Malteser, Brot für die Welt, Ministerial und so weiter. Wir haben erlebt, dass auch christliche Organisationen in arabisch-muslimischen Ländern eine hohe Glaubwürdigkeit besitzen und dort arbeiten können.
The German government works very closely with various religious organizations like Caritas International, the Maltesers, Bread for the World, Ministerial, to mention just a few. We have seen that Christian organizations also enjoy a lot of support and backing in Muslim countries. They have a high degree of credibility there.
Wir gehen davon aus, dass wir Hilfe für alle zur Verfügung stellen. Wenn wir eine Ortschaft, eine Stadt, eine Region unterstützen, dann soll die Hilfe allen zugutekommen. Wir wollen im Rahmen unserer Hilfe das friedliche Miteinander ermöglichen, indem Beiräte, Gremien geschaffen werden, wo alle vertreten sind, Vertreter aller Religionen, zum Beispiel im Nordirak, der Muslime, der Christen, der Jesiden, und die nur zusammen den Erfolg für ihre Gemeinschaft haben. Alle müssen um einen Tisch sitzen und gemeinsam die Zukunft beraten, und das ist Voraussetzung für die Unterstützung.
We believe that our support needs to benefit each and every one, all of the people. So if we support a region, a village, a community, then our support is for all the people there. And through our support, we want to enable people to move towards peaceful coexistence. And what we do is we support bodies, platforms, where representatives of all the faith communities are present. In Iraq, to give you an example, that would involve Muslims, Christians, or Yazidis. And all of these must then come together, sit together, to make plans for the future together. That is a requirement, a condition for our support.
Und Deutschland setzt stark auf internationale Kooperation, auf multilateralen Ansatz im Rahmen der Vereinten Nationen oder wir in der Europäischen Union oder OSZE, manchmal auch NATO und anderen. Wir müssen uns aber zukünftig besser abstimmen. Ich war vor 3 Monaten in der Ninive-Ebene. Dort gibt es Regionen, wo weiße Flecken der Hilfe, zum Beispiel westlich Mosul, südlich Sinjar, gerade die Gemeinde, wo Nadia Murad herkommt, Krutschu, wo sich wenig tut, und andere Dörfer, andere Städte, wo sich sehr viel tut. Und wir müssen uns besser abstimmen, dass nicht dort, wo jemand sehr aktiv ist, ein Priester zum Beispiel, der sehr engagiert ist, viel Hilfe hinfließt und ins Nachbardorf, die sich vielleicht nicht so gut international aufstellen, dann keine Hilfe ankommt. Und darum wollen wir uns besser abstimmen, damit flächig Unterstützung ankommt.
Germany also has a very strong focus on international cooperation and on the multilateral approach. We work together with the UN, with the EU, of course, with the OSCE, or with the NATO, to mention just a few. But I believe that in the future we will need to align our various efforts more closely. I visited the Ninive plain just recently, and I was able to see that there are white spots of support. In the region west of Mosul or south of Sinjar, in the region where Nadia Murad is from, there are great differences. There are places where a lot is happening, where there's a lot of support, and there are other areas where not much is happening at all. And we think it should not depend on whether a region has a very committed priest or pastor who has a lot of outreach and then attracts a lot of support, whereas other regions that lack such actively involved people receive less support. So I would like to plead for us all to achieve greater alignment in our support efforts.
Great, thank you. So I think we heard today, starting with the way the session opened, that certain groups have been specifically targeted because of their religious belief. But then we heard from Administrator Green and from each of our ministers and Archbishop here today that there is a real evidence base of bringing together the interfaith community as a convener, as a representative of the community, but not just listening, but translating what you've heard into action through direct investment through the communities that have the specific needs. And I think I'm very encouraged by this direct investment, bringing in the commissioner's concept of monitoring, but monitoring for the standpoint of impact and measuring our impact, but also monitoring to be able to bring best practices together to share them through the different communities of faith. Because we all know countries are rebuilt as a strong, religious, free country through individual communities. So thank you very much for your examples. I want to really appreciate the interpreters who kept up with a lot of information very quickly. Post lunch and did a wonderful job. Thank you so much. Coffee break.